Hi, so today we'll be talking about the first lecture of testing and measurement class, and the title is Basic Concepts in Psychological Testing. So I made my own notes based on the slides that are shared by the instructor, and I will be going over these notes while explaining the concepts. So firstly, we have assessment. An assessment is basically like just collecting information from multiple sources about an individual to make inferences about the person. We can give the example of university entrance exams for this, like we're kind of assessing the individual based on multiple things, and we're assessing like how their knowledge on multiple things, etc. So testing is collecting a representative sample of behavior using standardized procedure. It's like it is done on a particular topic, whereas assessment is like we're assessing the individual on multiple things, like you take the SATs or you take the YKS, and you're being assessed on multiple things, but testing is just based on one particular topic. So measurement is like the rules that we use, rules for assigning numbers to represent traits and behaviors. So why do we use psychological tests? Like, why do we use them? So first of all, they are practical. They help us in the in clinics, like so we can diagnose the patients, we can treat them, we can use them in the work environment to diagnose people, for like selecting them for like whom to hire or whom to put in which position. So or we can classify them, or we can learn how to train our workers, and we can evaluate our workers based on these psychological tests. And we can use these tests also in education for diagnosing, for vocational guidance or university admissions, or for licensing we can use psychological tests. So for the second reason is research related, so we can investigate the outcomes of the practice and we can identify the determinants of behavior, so we can see the individual differences between different kinds of behavior, and we can see the cultural differences between different kinds of behavior. So what do we measure? We measure a lot of things in psychological testing. Some examples are intelligence, aptitude or skill, achievement, knowledge, personality, interest inventories, attitude, value, behavioral things, and neuropsychological things. So what is a psychological test? It's a standardized procedure for sampling behavior and describing it with categories or scores. And psychological tests has a purpose. It has to have a purpose. So in order to measure psychological construct, we need to look at the behavior sample. So psychological things are not directly observable. We can't really directly look into the mind of the person. So we have to infer from the behavior. We can give examples to this based on like memory research. You cannot really look into the memory of the person directly, but you can infer certain aspects of memory through looking at their behavior, looking at what they maybe what they talk about their, like something that remember, etc. So we need to standardize the circumstances. So standardization is extremely important. Otherwise, we would have so many extraneous variables. And extraneous variables are basically the things, the variables that we didn't we didn't take into account before starting our study, our research, our experiments. So we need to really make sure that we are offering almost the same exact circumstances to every single participant, so that we will have no extraneous variables. So we have different kinds of tests. Firstly, we have maximum performance tests, and maximum performance tests are based on how well the person performs. They can be based on achievement, or they can be based on aptitudes. They can be objective or subjective. What objective or subjective means is they could be like, this could be like an IQ test where there are objective answers to the questions, or it could be a subjective test, meaning that it could be like asking a participants to remember something from like their memory from some time ago, and ask them to tell us the most amount of details as possible, and then we would be evaluating these like the information, but we would have to be subjective. I mean, we cannot really like objectively test certain things, although we are asking for them to perform at their maximum capacity. So that will be the subjective test, like we need to interpret certain information in order to statistically analyze the participants' answers. So maximum performance test also can be speed or power test as well. So they focus on what the individual can do, and they motivate the participants to perform successfully at their maximal effort. And participants must know what to do in the task. We need to tell them like exactly what they need to do, and then they try to do it at their best capacity. So the second type of test is the typical response test, and we use these to measure personality or behavior, attention, interest, etc. So these are objectively scored tests. They rely on self-report. Like the participant, for example, like answers a question like, how much do you relate to this sentence, and there's like a sentence given, and then they give a rating out of 1 to 5, for example. So we can use projective tests, and this is based on like how a person responds to certain things, and then we just kind of project. So we project certain things through how they respond. So typical response test, I did not write it correctly at first. They can be objective or subjective as well. So we need to remember that they can be subjective as well. So in projective test, basically it's just how a person responds to the test, and we just kind of analyze how they respond, etc. So behavioral observations, so it could be based on behavioral observations as well. So self-report instruments, participant is asked to report their typical behavior, feeling, attitude, belief, or value in self-report instruments. So these things can be helpful because we don't really have to put a lot of effort. We can just send the participants like a link, so they will just like kind of fill in the enquete for us, but we will don't put a lot of effort, but and they are used in personality inventories, initial clinical assessments. They can be based on self-reports, but there are certain things that are crucial about self-report instruments. Like, we need to make sure the test taker is very aware and honest about their behavior, because when we're answering like psychological tests and stuff, we are inclined to answer things that makes us happy, not the truth. So we need to be honest while answering these things, but we are going to be somewhat biased about our own choices, because we don't want to feel bad. So there is the risk of socially desirable responding, which means that we are not really getting an accurate picture of what's going on. So the reason behind that is that we are not good judges of our own personality. We can't really estimate certain things. So there are certain risks involved in self-report instruments, of course. And then we have projective and implicit tests, and they are done to assess unconscious personality and attitudes. And in projective tests, I have talked about this earlier. In the typical response test, we have said that typical response tests can be projective. And here in projective implicit tests, they are done to assess unconscious personality and attitudes. So in projective tests are based on how the person responds to some ambiguous stimuli by creating stories, and experts scores unconscious motives. So basically, we just kind of ask them to answer to something ambiguous by creating stories, etc. So it's inclined to be examined in a more subjective way, because the expert is supposed to analyze the answers of the participants. But it can be a good way of finding out what the participant thinks about certain things. And then we have implicit tests. And in implicit test, the person doesn't really know what is being tested. Like, it's personality attitude test. The person doesn't really know the real purpose of the test, or it's hard to fake the responses. If you ever took the implicit test done by Harvard, I think it's a very difficult test to manipulate, and because you're asked to solve it as fast as possible, and you're inclined to show your subconscious biases towards certain groups. So we can give an example to hard to fake responses based on that test. I recommend you to take it if you haven't yet. Implicit tests can be based on objective scoring, like Harvard's implicit test is based on objective scoring. It's based on how fast you answer the certain questions and how fast you can group certain items. So the system kind of records your the time it takes for you to group certain items, and then you kind of then that's analyzed, and then it gives you information about your implicit biases. So it's just based on statistics. So it could be based on objective scoring based if it's multiple choice. Or it could be reaction time testing. As I said, this was the one that I was explaining is the reaction time testing. Or it can be multiple choice questions, which will be like just based on your answers. So behavior observation is observing the behavior and responding in particular context. It differs from performance test in the sense that a subject doesn't really have single well-defined task. An observer is recording the behavior and duration and the intensity. So, like for example, when children are interacting, observer is recording their behavior, like how long they have how long they have interacted, like how the intensity of the conversation, etc. So it's not really like, yeah. So we need to have certain assumptions to assess. We need to start with certain assumptions when we are doing psychological tests. So we need to assume that psychological constructs exist. Like without psychological constructs, because it doesn't make any sense for us to like test people, stuff like that. It doesn't make sense. So we need to assume that. And constructs can be measured. So if they cannot be measured, then there is no point of like doing psychological tests again. And the measurement is not going to be perfect, obviously. And we need to have different ways to measure any given construct. There are strengths and limitations of different ways, and we need to have multiple sources for the best assessment, like the most accurate assessment. We need to have multiple sources, and we can kind of generalize to the whole, generalize the behavior to like a general behavior based on scores on tests or like just studies, and these psychological tests or assessments, they aid in decisions, and they have a fair manner, and they can benefit the society or the individual, because if it's not really benefiting any of those things, it doesn't really make sense for us to conduct these studies. So we do psychological measurement, and it's expressing individual differences in numeric form, and scales of measurement is providing a number or type of label to designate group members with respect to a variable. So we can have nominal scale or ordinal scale or interval or ratio. So the difference is that nominal is just, it's based on, wait a second. So nominal is based on names. So it could be like gender, it's like female or male. I already wrote it. It could be female or male, or it could be like what's your education level, etc. So it's equal, and it's just based on differences. So ordinal is like, it could be level of satisfaction, like how satisfied are you from the cafeteria in your campus, and you could be like vote from 1 to 5, 5 being like the highest, 1 being the lowest. it's like that, it's just ordinal. And interval is like based on certain intervals, but there is no zero. There is no zero, we have intervals. Ratio is just, it's intervals with zero. So it's starting from zero to from certain intervals and so things like that. The only difference between interval and ratio is that. So with ordinal scale, we can rank, order people's relative standing, and we can use statistics. So let's say that we are trying to understand how happy our students are from our campus cafeteria, right? So we just ask them like how happy you are, and when we ask this, we can't really statistically analyze like the students' answers. So we need to ask them to like pick a number from 1 to 5, 5 being the highest, like I'm extremely satisfied, and 1 being like I'm extremely like I'm disappointed, I don't like the cafeteria, I don't like the food. So we need ordinal scale in order to analyze the answers. So we have psychometric concepts, and they are used to evaluation. They are done to evaluate the psychological tests. And so we have 2 concepts to evaluate psychological tests. First of all, we have reliability, then we have validity. So reliability is the consistency of the instrument. It's like a good scale. It's the same object. So reliability, we can give the example of a good scale, and same object. So if we have a really good quality scale, then we will be pretty sure that it will be like counting exactly the same every single time we put the same object with the same weight on the scale. So no matter if it's the morning, night, etc., it will give the same results. So we want something similar from the test, the psychological test. We want to make sure that every time we took the test, like it doesn't matter when we take the test. It doesn't matter like in which mood we are in when we take the test. Obviously, all these things unfortunately matter, but we want to minimize these things as much as possible. When we have successfully made a psychological test and with high reliability, that means that we are getting something close to accurate, something that kind of always gives us very similar results every time we take the test, every time we get on the scale. I don't want to give the example of a human like getting on a scale because like our weights kind of fluctuate quite a lot, so I just don't think it makes sense. So I always like the example of the object when talking about like the object on the scale when talking about reliability. I don't really like the human example, but you can use it. It doesn't matter all that much, I guess. And then we have validity, and validity is are we really measuring what we want to measure with this test? Like we want to learn about if the person really likes the cafeteria, if the cafeteria is good for the person, etc. So we want to find that out, right? We just really want to improve our cafeteria in order to we just decided that all of a sudden. So then we made a test, and we are just like asking the students based on the test, and then we just put something like do you enjoy being in the campus, or do you like your classes? Questions like that. But these questions are not really like working for the purpose that we want to we want to find out about like what students think about the cafeteria. We don't want to find out like what they do in their free time, right? So we don't really need these questions, and they're not really working for our purpose. And we need only the questions that are like for the purpose of our study, in this case the cafeteria. I don't know why I obsessed about the cafeteria improving. I don't know. So validity is the test based on a purpose? Is it testing what it's supposed to test? These things. So prediction is forecasting a relationship. So variance is the degree of spread within distribution. So how much do our samples vary? It just means that if we have a larger spread, then we're going to have larger variance in our data. And variance is the sum of square differences from mean of each score divided by the number of scores. So this is the formulation of variance. And then we have standard deviation, and standard deviation is done like it's karekök. Let me find the English version of it. The square root of variance is standard deviation. So variability is the foundation of psychological testing. If there is no variability, there is no making decisions about people. So we need variability. If we have variability, then we have an accurate estimation about the distinction. We need to be able to distinguish certain things in our test, and in order to have that, in order to accurately estimate these distinctions, we need certain variability. So it has implications for correlation and prediction. Correlation, we have talked about prediction here, I think. So correlation and prediction is values of one variable increase and decrease versus values of other variables. Like they just correlate, like they are correlated with each other. If one is increasing and the other is increasing, or one is increasing and other is decreasing, and they have a significant statistically significant relationship between each other, then we can say that these things are correlating. And if they're correlating, maybe we can say, like, let's say that we have found out that one variable increases and the other is decreasing. So we can say that we have found out that this is increasing, or we're thinking about this increasing. So we can say that in this sense, if the first variable is increasing, then the second variable will decrease even further. So we can kind of assume that. So prediction, or we can also call it linear regression. It is important in validating a test based on linear regression. So we have a certain formula for this. Y is criterion, and the dv, y is the dv, and we have this formula here. Each x is predictor variable, and each iv, it has their own value on a test. So we use this formulation for for linear regression, for predicting and validating a test. So it is based on linear regression, as I've said, and this is the formulation that we use. And as you can see, the y is the dv, dependent variable, and the these are all different IVs, and we see the effects of these IVs on the dv based on this formulation. So the B slope of the line is the same for everyone, basically. Factors that affect correlation are, so first off, we have linear regression. So when we say linear regression, what we mean is this. So what we see is that linearly, these things, the data is increasing, and there is some sort of linear relationship between different factors, like variables. But here we can't really see this. We can't really say that this is increasing in this way or anything. There is no there's no like significance of these data. They're just kind of spread away kind of randomly, so we can't really detect anything from this. And we also use the term range restriction. It is the variability of scores that influence magnitude of association observed in a sample. So what we mean is that when we restrict our participants to only psychology students, we can see that only this part of data, we can only see this part of data, but we need to kind of see, like, start from here to, like, we need to see the whole picture, right? We need the whole picture, but now we are just seeing this part. So we need to see the other departments in different universities, like with different success ranks. We can't just look at psychology students because they are in such a small portion of the whole population. We need to look from the beginning and here to see a more significant score, significant relationship. So coefficient of determination is correlation, is the karesi, the square of correlation coefficient, and it shows the amount of variance between two data sets, basically. Correlation of 0.50 represents only 25 variance between two sets of data. So what this means is that we can only explain the results of, like, the 25% of the results based on our IV. The rest of the 75% of effect is coming from different sources than we have thought of. So we have not found a significant relationship of any sorts, it means. So we can kind of give a more like objective example to this, because it can be too it may be hard to kind of imagine. So let's say that we are trying to find if there is a correlation between intelligence and job performance. And then what we find is that there is 0.5 correlation coefficient in our data, and which means that we can only explain the 25% of variance of variability in job performance based on intelligence. The rest of the 75% is explained on other factors. So it's not really related. We didn't find a significant result. So based on this information, correlation of 30% is, as you can see, it's only 9% variance is explained and other factors are involved. And we can use factor analysis as well. And factor analysis is an important statistical concept in construct validation. And it is used to analyze patterns of correlation amongst items and measures. And its principal goal of factor analysis is to reduce numbers of dimensions needed to describe data derived from large number of items. So we need to extract patterns of intercorrelation among set of variables, and we use the factor analysis. So we can kind of reduce the number of dimensions needed to describe our data derived from large number of items. We are extracting the patterns of intercorrelations among sort of variables. Some examples to what factor analysis tells us are personality tests with adjectives. So we find the similar adjectives are usually found in the same people. Like if the person is talkative, then the person is usually active, and then person is usually sociable and outgoing. So all these things are somewhat connected, we find. And we also can use unrelated adjectives and different factors. So like we can find what is not related. So let's say that maybe not all talkative people, maybe not all talkative people are also friendly. Maybe friendliness is not exactly like significantly associated with these terms. So we find that, and then we put friendly in a different category with different groups. So it just, factor analysis helps us to find the significant relationships between different groups.